Definitely didn't want to have to do this. Did not want to have to talk about Duke losing to the North Carolina Tar Heels, but they did in the last second. Duke nearly able to pull off the victory, but Seth Trimble from the corner, that's going to be something flashing in our brains for a lifetime. Duke falls to North Carolina. Let's unpack here on Locked On Blue Devils.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with J.J. Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is J.J. Jackson. So great to have you here with us today on this Monday, February 9th, 2026. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on inside the life of Duke athletics. On today's show, we unpack the weekend game that Duke had against the North Carolina Tar Heels, where the Blue Devils fell by 3 points. A last-second buzzer beater from Seth Trimble puts the Tar Heels on top, and Duke earns their second loss of this season. We'll unpack all of that and so much more with our good buddy Ben McCormick from Duke Wisdom. We break that down here on today's show. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free, wherever it is that you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Take a moment, if you will, watch our show each and every day on YouTube. Like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Continuing our climb towards 5,000 subscribers on Locked On Blue Devils, and want you guys to continue to be a part of this journey with us here on YouTube. Follow us on X at LO_Blue Devils. Follow me there as well at _JJ_Jackson_. And the show is also on Instagram and TikTok. Check us out over there. So without further ado, Ben McCormick hanging out with us on today's show. And what an unbelievably tough loss for Duke against the North Carolina Tar Heels by 3. How are you holding up, Ben? I'm not doing too well, man.
Yeah, I wish I were here under better circumstances. But I mean, it's never fun to lose to Carolina. I think big picture, this loss isn't a massive deal for Duke. They're still 21-2, still on the one line. But, you know, losing on a buzzer beater to Carolina, pretty much your worst nightmare, like coming true, especially when Carolina doesn't lead for a single second of that game until there's 0.4 on the clock. And then it's almost like rubbing salt in the wound that they had to clear the court and make them come back out there just for a failed attempt that I feel like everybody knew was going to be a failed attempt. But so it's tough, but I think I'm trying to look big picture and remind myself that it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, and now so much people after the fact want to make a bigger deal of the court storming of it all, of Jon Scheyer talking about an incident that played out with the staff member on Duke, and then people wanting to question the validity of Jon Scheyer's claims and whatnot. We've heard today on the Monday morning ACC teleconference that that staff member had a bloodied lip, had been trampled, but is okay. And ultimately, Jon Scheyer just asking for better procedures to play out at the end of games because, look, Duke is the type of program that when we lose, it's noteworthy and people want to take advantage to celebrate and that sort of thing. Gotten to the point where rivalries, it's happening now too with North Carolina. But we'll kind of leave it there at that. I just hate that that's kind of where so many people want to go now is, not talking as much about the game and talking about the events that played out afterwards.
Yeah, I think a lot of this started setting in motion with that Wake Forest game a couple of years ago when, Kyle Filipowski gets hurt and the whole stampede of students. And so it's difficult. And I think Duke's in a really vulnerable position because everybody hates Duke, especially Carolina, especially Wake Forest. And they're not really accustomed to Carolina storming the court. So that's not something they see very often. They saw it this weekend. And it's really difficult. I hate to be the party pooper that's like, we need to stop the court storming because I think it's a really cool part of college basketball. But at the end of the day, you are responsible for making sure that your opponent that you welcomed into your stadium isn't put in danger in any way. And I think that didn't happen this weekend.
Yeah, it's such a unique perspective from the Duke basketball side of things that court storms happen against you. Like, you don't really take part in court storming. That just does not play out inside Cameron Indoor Stadium because the level of excellence has been up there for so long. There's not these crazy home wins that you want to go and celebrate after the fact and that sort of thing. So enough of that for a moment. Let's get to the basketball. 71-68, the final score, a 12-point lead at halftime for the Blue Devils. Saw North Carolina storm back. They made big shots down the stretch. I mean, tip our cap to Derek Dixon, and some of the 3-point shots that he was making. And then Veesaar knocks down a three. He finally started to wake up in the second half for North Carolina. And ultimately down the stretch, BUZZER missed a few shots for Duke right around the rim. There's the foul discrepancy that we could talk about. Where do you want to go from here, Ben? Because there's so many different ways we can look at this game.
I want to look at the front court. I think that's the most important part of this game to me, because Cameron BUZZER starts the game so slow, because obviously Hubert Davis's game plan was, we're going to stop Cameron BUZZER. We're going to make everybody else beat us. And for the first few minutes of that game, that worked really well for Duke, actually, because they got the guards going. They went up 13 really fast. Wilson hadn't done anything to start the game. You felt good. But then eventually foul trouble starts getting into things for Duke. And once Patrick Ngongba starts having to come out of that game, things start getting really dicey. Maliq Brown comes in, and I love Maliq Brown to death. I think he's one of the best defenders Duke has had, at least in the 21st century. But he looked really out of place at the game. He struggled mightily to defend Veesaar and Wilson in the paint. Anytime he was on Wilson in the first half, I mean, Wilson was going right around him. He was going right over him. And so really the only guy you could put on Wilson was Cameron BUZZER. And so if Ngongba wasn't on the floor, that left Brown on Veesaar, and he's just drastically undersized for that matchup. And you saw what happened down the stretch of that second half, that they were just repeatedly going inside and inside and inside, and Duke couldn't handle it. And say what you will about the foul discrepancy, but Duke had to play with what they had, and they just weren't able to get the best of that interior matchup at all.
Yeah, one of those situations where the front court depth has been something that we've highlighted even in the preseason before the year played out, going all the way back, honestly, to the spring when Duke's building the roster that they had, about like, look, there's only a handful of guys on this team that are capable of coming into a game like this. And I wouldn't pick anybody other than the three that Duke's got in Maliq Brown, Patrick Ngongba the second, Cameron BUZZER. But when someone's in foul trouble, you're really wishing there are a few other options that can take place as well. And then on the Veesaar and Caleb Wilson side of things, you're hopeful that their foul's being called on the other end to even it out a little bit, and that you can feel like you're able to defend the way you want to and that sort of thing, and not put yourself in danger of getting in foul trouble because the same thing is happening on your end of the floor, and that just wasn't the case.
Yeah, it's a little unfortunate. I mean, usually Duke's pretty accustomed to Cameron BUZZER's drawing a lot of fouls. A lot of their game is predicated on the fact that BUZZER draws a lot of contact. But it almost seems like the officials didn't want to call stuff because BUZZER's not a guy that's going to sell a foul. He goes up through contact. You saw it on the very last play, that isolation play. He got a little bit of contact from Veesaar. He went straight up through it. He didn't, flinch at all. And maybe that's the reason that calls weren't happening. I don't know. I mean, all we can really do is speculate about why they weren't being called ultimately. But I do know that the Duke's front court, it struggled to match up. And that was something that I was really worried about because I knew that Carolina's front court was one of the best in the country. It seemed like almost Wilson controlled the start of the game, BUZZER controlled the middle of the game, and then Veesaar controlled the end of the game. And Wilson and BUZZER kind of equalized almost, right? But Veesaar made a pretty big impact at the end of the game. And at center, Ngongba wasn't able to really do anything offensively because of how few minutes he played. So my worry came into fruition, really, that Duke's guards were going to be forced to win that game. And Evans continued to struggle shooting the ball.
Yep.
Caleb Foster didn't play poorly, but he's not exactly the point guard, scoring, fill it up kind of guy that has given Carolina a lot of trouble this year. Like Boopie Miller, Abuka Okori gave them a lot of trouble. Caleb just couldn't do that, and Duke's guards couldn't do that. And so my biggest worry kind of came true, that Duke's guards just couldn't do enough when they really should have had a noticeable advantage over Carolina's guards.
Yeah, and unfortunately, North Carolina was able to capitalize by going into the post there in the second half. Duke still won the points in the paint battle, but boy, it was much more competitive in that second half than it was in the first. So Duke's at this 12-point lead. Cameron BUZZER really put together a good performance down the stretch for Duke. Unfortunately, though, the last few sequences, we weren't able to see BUZZER get the job done. There have been replays and kind of still images that clearly look like he's being fouled on a couple of drives to the rim and whatnot, but got no calls, 0 free throw attempts in the second half for Duke, a team that prides themselves on getting to the free throw line. We can argue about the percentages because they've been bad in some stretches there, but you're hopeful that you'd be able to earn some free points from the charity stripe, and that just did not happen for Duke. We've got so many different things that we want to unpack and so much more when Locked On Blue Devils continues in a moment. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The winter games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the winter games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The drama of curling matches that start slow and somehow get intense fast, speed skating races decided by inches, and so much more. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better place to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game, a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Guys, thank you so much for making Locked On Blue Devils your first listen and your first watch here today. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, check out our new Everydayer Club. I talk often about the Everydayers, the guys that join us each and every day here on Locked On Blue Devils and make our show a part of your daily routine. Well, let me tell you about the new Everydayer Club. It's access to an ad-free audio version of Locked On Blue Devils compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. It's got an invite to our members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of the show and so much more. Go to lockedonbluedevils.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. Join the Everydayer Club here with us at Locked On Blue Devils. All right, my guy Ben McCormick from Duke Wisdom is here hanging out with us, and we're unpacking this Duke basketball loss at the hands of the North Carolina Tar Heels and some individual performances noteworthy. Certainly what we saw from Cam BUZZER. What do you make of his line there? 24 points, 11 rebounds, the 4 turnovers, yes. But, boy, he definitely stepped up to the test. A little slower out of the gates than one Mr. Caleb Wilson. But BUZZER got going. BUZZER got his and showed why he's the best player in the sport.
Yeah, like I said, their game plan, and especially Wilson's game plan, I mean, you could see it in that kid that he wanted to go at Cameron BUZZER at any chance he got, basically. And he made Cam's his life hard, right? Like, and Veesaar was throwing doubles at him, and Cam hasn't seen doubles from 2 bigs that are that capable at the same time. And so, yeah, he felt a little sped up for a couple of plays at the beginning. But he's the type of player that doesn't force things. So if Carolina's going to put that much pressure on him and leave other guys open, he wasn't going to force it. He was going to let that be the offensive scheme, take himself out of things, but he was still a magnet for the defense. He was still drawing guys. And eventually Carolina figured out, well, that's not going to work. They started playing him one-on-one a little more, and he proved why he is the National Player of the Year favorite. If you play him one-on-one, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. Like, yeah, he did miss some chippers, but he played a really, really strong game. And it felt like for a while there that Wilson was getting the better of him, but then you kept looking at the stats and you go, well, he's chasing him. Eventually, he actually outscored him, which didn't feel right at the time. But when you look back at it, you go, this dude just finds a way to be the best player on the court regardless of the game.
Yeah, and, notice Ben didn't flinch. He didn't stutter or anything like that. The best player in the game, no matter what, was Cam BUZZER with him stepping up and putting together the performance that he did. All right, you mentioned some of the struggles of Isaiah Evans. Finishes in double figures with 11 points. So, Everydayers, it is the very first time Duke has lost a game when Slim got to double figures there. Goes 4 of 14, just 1 of 4 from three-point range, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, and 4 of 14, but in some ways it felt like he didn't take 14 shots. Like, even seeing that number surprises me because there just wasn't this loud and kind of vocal impact that Slim had.
Yeah, I think there were actually a lot of stretches where I was like, where is Isaiah?
Yeah.
Like, honestly, I was like, where is that dude? Because when Cam wasn't playing or he wasn't getting touches consistently, he is supposed to be the guy that creates offense for Duke. And I think it's pretty easy to predict that these Duke Carolina games this year are going to go as Isaiah Evans goes. Like, Duke needs their backcourt to dominate Carolina's in order to comfortably win these games. And Veesaar kind of unexpectedly played that role for a while, but he cooled off eventually. And those are the kind of moments where you want Isaiah Evans, right? Like that Florida game even. He was 0 of 8, but he came in and made a massive shot. And you're at the end of that game, I was almost thinking, like, That's what Duke needs. They need that Isaiah Evans 3-point shot. They need something. And he got some open looks, and he missed them. And I really think those were crucial misses. I don't want to pin the whole loss on Isaiah or anything, but like I do think that he can be the margin of error here against Carolina, especially in that second matchup.
Yeah, I would imagine that we're going to see a much more aggressive and, quite frankly, a better version of Slim when the Tar Heels come back to Cameron Indoor to close out the one that we played that way. What about Dame Sarr? Really awesome game for him. Finishes with 13 points, 5 of 6 from the floor, 2 of 3 from 3, 6 rebounds. I think a lot of people want to talk about the jump shots, and certainly that's the case. But being aggressive, using his size and length against a big-time opponent in terms of size, the North Carolina being the third tallest team in all of America, needed the rebounding effort from Sarr. If only he could put his toes back just a smidge on some of those corner shots to make them threes instead of twos. All in all, though, this was a big step forward for the Dame Sarr fans out there.
Yeah, I almost hate that they wasted such a good Dame Sarr game
Right.
in a loss. But, like, you couldn't have predicted that he was going to do this. But I do think that maybe if he is doing this, Duke doesn't have a lot of actions that are drawn up specifically to get Dame shots. They've got a lot of things drawn up to get Evans shots. Maybe that needs to change. Like, maybe Dame needs more opportunities. Maybe his shot count should exceed 10 in a few games down the stretch here this season, so that, you know, when they get to postseason time, they feel comfortable with Dame Sarr as a second option scorer, because that's ultimately what he was in this game. It didn't feel like it, though. It felt like he was just getting shots when they came to him. But maybe Duke should be a more aggressive team and actually seeking out Dame Sarr shots.
Yeah, because it seems that he's going to be the guy kind of moving forward. He's been healthy. He's been out there. And you look at the minutes discrepancy in a game like this, Sarr 33 minutes out there for Duke. Nick Hamenia just 4. I mean, this was the fewest amount of minutes we've seen Hamenia play in a game this season for Duke. Further down the bench, Darren Harris with the DNP. So this was a rotation that, even given the foul trouble, was very cut down.
Nick looked really unready, unprepared in those couple of possessions that he played in. Like he looked nervous. And I mean, and that's how a freshman probably is supposed to play in this rivalry, arguably. Like, you're probably not supposed to do what Cameron Boozer does. But I do think what we learned is that in big games and tight games where the atmosphere is tight, it's intense, this rotation's a little bit shorter than we thought it was. Like, I think that we've been thinking this is a 9-man rotation. Maybe it's more accurately 7. And at times, honestly, it felt like it was more like 6. Like, Caden Boozer did play, but didn't do a lot, didn't play a ton. So it really felt like there were really just 6 guys battling all night for Duke.
And, you know, we need more than that in some games like this when you got foul trouble going on and want other players to step up and whatnot. Caden Boozer had a couple of good drives and finishes, knocked down a big 3 in the first half of this game, but really wasn't the biggest X factor for this North Carolina game. Maybe that's to come here. And then, like you mentioned, there was Caleb Foster moments where he didn't necessarily take over. Those lead guards for Duke. Anything else you want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, they say guards win in March, and that's the hardest thing for this team, I think, right now, is figuring out who is that floor general. Like, Caleb Foster has had his moments. I think he's been a fantastic Duke player, but I think a lot of people are still waiting for that next step. When you think about, like, those senior or junior-led guard teams, that junior year is a pivotal year. Like, you think about Quinn Cook, you think about Wendell Moore, you think about the step that Tyrese Proctor took last season.
Yep.
And we're still waiting for Caleb to take that step. Like, he clearly took a step, but I think Duke would like it to be a little bit larger. I think they would like him to be a little more aggressive on offense and be able to take over in moments like this, so you don't have to lean quite as heavily on those 18 and 19-year-olds.
Yeah, look, the rivalry is so back. It never went away, but I just want the world to know that it is so back. The numbers, again, looking at the last 60 seasons as they kept flashing throughout the game and whatnot, it's unbelievable that we get to witness something like this. And you get players stepping up and having the big-time games and not shying away from the moment. And it's a great feeling knowing that these guys are coming to Cameron Indoor a little bit later. Again, the second tallest team in America is Duke. The third tallest team is North Carolina. There's just so much size in matchups like this. And I know that now this has left a sour taste in the Duke players' mouth. And that's going to be really exciting to see them the next time. We got a long way to go. Several games that you can't let this carry over, and we'll get to that in the final second. But I just want to talk there, the fact that you do have North Carolina coming up on the schedule once again.
I think immediately, like in those last few minutes of the game, my head was like, Carolina's going to take its first lead with the clock at double zeros. Like it just felt like that was the way they were headed. It's what happens. Seth Trimble hits the three. You're going to have to watch that for the rest of your life. Like, and that sucks. But I immediately started thinking Austin Rivers 2012. That's what this feels like to me, but just roles reversed.
Yep.
Like the team that isn't necessarily the better team had a late comeback, hit a huge shot. It's huge for the fans. It's not a bad team. Like this Carolina team, really good team. I think they're finding their way. They could end up being a 3 seed, like quality team by the end of the year. They're really solid. And I think that Duke team in 2012 was really solid, you know, despite the Lehigh loss. But ultimately, Carolina was better in 2012. Like they just were. They were a 1 seed. They were the best team in the ACC. I feel the same way about this Duke team. I don't think this changed anything. I think they're the best team in the conference. I still think they're a better team than Carolina. They just weren't this weekend, but I do think that they're going to handle business in that second matchup. I think that they don't have much choice. You don't often see that the team that isn't the better team in the rivalry comes up with a sweep. That just doesn't happen very often. So I got to feel pretty confident heading into that second one.
Yeah, same. I mean, I'm not going to waver one bit. We'll see how these next couple of games go. But regardless, I think we saw toe-to-toe. Duke's in a really good spot, what they were doing in the first half. I mean, people were talking about some of the offensive sets that Duke was running against the Tar Heels. I mean, it pretty much did not matter what they were doing. John Shire was getting where he wanted to in terms of the plays he was drawing up for Duke in that first half. And just got to continue to execute down the stretch. Hopefully you're able to get to the free throw line more frequently. Don't want any more images like this, like we've got on the screen of kind of a dejected, a down tired, BUZZER had a no call, honestly, on a drive for North Carolina. That was just, I don't know how there's no call that plays out here, but I digress.
That was a crazy. It felt like the entire stadium stopped. Like every single person in there was like, "We're not calling something. Do we miss the whistle or something?
Something needs to happen here. Hello, something." But it didn't. So, all right, what's next for Duke? Well, they've got a game at Pitt where the Blue Devils will look to pick up another conference victory. We'll talk about that here in a moment. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at Indeed. Yeah, that's right. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed sponsored jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, and location. If I were hiring, I wouldn't just want someone who can help. I'd want someone with real experience who can jump right in. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Indeed is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is also brought to you by Wayfair. The new year is here, and it's the perfect time to reset your routine and refresh your space. If you're spending more time at home, you might as well love how it looks and feels. That's why you should turn to Wayfair. It's a one-stop shop for getting your home back on track. From bedding and mattresses to storage solutions for every room, Wayfair makes it easy to start the year fresh. Wayfair has everything you need for a full home refresh all in one place. Whether you're updating your living room, organizing your space, or upgrading your work from home setup, Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find exactly what you're looking for your style and budget. Get organized and back on track this new year for way less. Head to Wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home, a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. All right, final segment here on today's episode. I'm JJ Jackson, joined today by my guy, Ben McCormick from Duke Wisdom. All right, Pitt tomorrow, 9 p.m. Eastern tip-off, a late one for Duke basketball, taking on a familiar face in Jeff Capel, who's in another season of leading the Panthers. Is there a concern at all about carryover effects from a deflating loss like this?
There's concern for Pitt. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that Duke's going to want to bounce back on this. Pitt's not doing so well. You mentioned Jeff Capel. His job might be in jeopardy. Like, Pitt just has not had a very good season.
They need a win like this, man.
They do. They do. I don't know if they've got it in them. Like, Pitt just hasn't demonstrated that they're very competitive with really good teams. Unlike maybe a Georgia Tech who played close with Duke, beat NC State, like, has proven that they can be there. I don't know if Pitt has that in them, honestly. But again, the ACC's a really good conference this year. Duke doesn't want to look past anybody, but I do think this is a really good chance for Duke to bounce back in a really good way. If you're Duke, you want to see a win by a lot. You don't want to just see a win. You want to see an emphatic victory where they don't have those big swings where they lose leads.
Yeah, Pitt is 9-15 overall on the season. Just saying the number out loud. Folks should do that for themselves. 9-15 overall. Not that great. And ESPN Analytics give Duke a 93.4% chance to win a game like this. I'm a little concerned maybe that there could be a slow start. It just feels like the first halves have been much better for Duke as of late. That's a trend. I don't want to continue seeing these 40-plus point first halves and then a little bit of struggles on the offensive end in the second half of play. But again, then before we're talking about, I hate these slow starts, and then they really turn it on in the second half. Still kind of looking for everything to come together and whatnot. But in an ACC season where, this is a Pitt team that only has 2 wins in conference, I guess we probably should feel pretty good about Duke's chances going into this thing.
Yeah, and I really like the way that the schedule's structured for Duke going down the stretch. Like, they have a really tough stretch here. But I'm glad that it worked out the way it did, where you got Carolina, you lose that game, but then you get Pitt. It feels like it's nothing's easy. Don't take anything for granted, but it's an easier step down before you step back up to Clemson on Saturday, where that's really a must win because you don't want to share the conference championship. You don't want to do that. You got to beat Clemson to make sure that doesn't happen, or even, forbid that you lose first place entirely to Clemson, who is playing really good basketball right now. And then again, after that Clemson game, it almost feels like a step down to Syracuse before a step back up to Michigan. So it's kind of nice layering.
For sure. And then, Virginia still looms, a Will Wade run-in with NC State, and then that final contest at home with North Carolina. The Tar Heels tomorrow, while Duke is playing Pitt, North Carolina is going to be on the road at Miami. So an opportunity for our guy, Jay Lucas, on his home floor to coach the Canes to a big win over the Tar Heels. And then this upcoming weekend when Duke is playing Clemson, Pitt travels to North Carolina. So they'll be playing in the Smith Center. Let's see how the week goes for North Carolina, man, because just like Duke, the carryover effects, I would not be too mad at all if North Carolina is riding super high with a win like this, that maybe you forget that, you got to move on to the next game and that sort of thing. Wouldn't be mad at that.
Yeah, that Miami game's a trap game for Carolina. And, I mentioned that Duke has a tough schedule. Outside of that Pitt game this weekend for Carolina, they got a gauntlet remaining on their schedule. They've got to go to State. They've got Virginia again. They've got Clemson. They've got Duke again. They've got a really tough remaining schedule. So if you're a Duke fan that's hoping revenge will find its way to Chapel Hill, it probably will at some point in the next couple of weeks because I imagine they go, undefeated through that.
Yeah, Duke fans, stay away from diddukewin.com because every single one of us have had friends send that URL into our inbox once again today. So unfortunate to unpack this one. I feel a little better, Ben, when I'm able to share my thoughts with you and you feel similarly about, it is one loss, but in the, the brighter picture, the grass is still green. And this is a Duke team that's still on the 1 seed line. They did not drop at all in the AP poll, still in firm position of first place within the ACC. Now you just cannot let there be carryover effect from what we saw against the Tar Heels. You've got an amazing site and podcast that I want people to go and check out called Duke Wisdom. Your branding there. Tell us a little bit about it and how people can support you, Ben.
Yeah, man, it's something I started when I was 11 years old, and I've been doing it now for 12 years. You can find us at Duke_Wisdom on any social media site that you're using pretty much. Go to dukewisdom.org to find articles and everything we've got there. Look up Duke Wisdom Podcast. You can hear Clinton Weaver and I cut it up on the podcast there. We'll be talking Carolina soon on there as well.
Awesome. Ben, good to see you, pal. We'll do this again soon, okay?
Thanks, JJ.
All right, that's Ben McCormick. Almost said Ben Wisdom. He is Duke Wisdom. Ben McCormick joining us on the program. Go support all of his work over there. And that's going to do it for our show here today with Locked On Blue Devils. Thank you guys so much for your support as always. Check out our Everydayer Club in the show notes down below. And also be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube and wherever it is that you get your podcast. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.